Do you know how to make suture from catgut?
I don't, but I
Okay.
someone does.
Oh, this is major. It's like the next big thing. Come catch the wave, yeah. Watch what's happening. A force of nature. Hit 'em like lightning. Be the creator of the next big thing. We're the movers and shakers. We are the dreamers, the makers. We stand on top of equators. We are the limitless. We got the future, no papers. We are the innovators. We have the focus like lasers. You know we doing it big. Oh, this is major.
Greetings and welcome to the Compromised to Alchemized podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Neil Bolton. Excited to introduce the guests I have for this episode. I interviewed the duo, the Birthing Instincts duo, comprised of Stuart James Fischbein, MD, Dr. Stu, and Blyss Young. So I'm going to go into who they are, but most of you know this, that you know them either by the podcast title or maybe you've heard of them. And part of that is you could be local to California, who and maybe you've come across them through your own needs when you were seeking out the help from a birth worker. Or I've heard from several people who they just said they voraciously gobbled up, all the episodes in preparing for their birth, even though they weren't able to necessarily have the help of Stu or Blyss. But I just want to talk about their synergy, their dynamic kind of nature, and it was really fun to interview both of them. They really wanted that, and of course, I say that because there was some technical difficulties, and at times we were like, even on the episode, we're thinking, and we're going to have to just go interview Dr. Stu, but no, we made it through. So I also thank you in advance for just any if you see anything, hear any glitches or anything like that, or just because we had to do a little bit of post editing to help some of this be more seamless. So I really love the way that they kind of pass the baton back and forth in the conversation. I've loved their podcast, listening to it, learning from them, seeing their rapport as well. And then also I went and I found the first episode that they had together on the podcast, which was back in October 17th, I think, of 2017. And I got to hear how they navigated a very difficult scenario, which you'll hear. And in terms of like how to help when things don't go the way we hope. And so definitely, with that, we talk about, the redemptive story of this infant who made it. But then I also do explain there for anybody who has lost anyone, really, that might be a hard part to hear, but I hope that you enjoy the beauty of the story. But we talk about panning out not just the podcast that they share, but how they've collaborated, and of course what each of them contribute to or think about certain topics. And we cover a few of them, so it was fun. Really appreciated them coming onto the podcast, and I'm hopeful you're going to enjoy it so much. I'm going to give you a condensed version of their bios because I think they probably feel okay with people knowing them already. But Blyss Young, LMCPM, she's a home birth midwife, educator, and advocate for holistic maternity care. She co-founded the Sanctuary Birth and Family Wellness Center in Los Angeles, which was the first collaborative birth center of its kind. And after nearly a decade of serving thousands of families and learning from renowned experts like Suzanne Arms, she transitioned to a more intimate midwifery practice, supporting families through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So, as I mentioned, they're co-hosts on the podcast, but she right now is currently traveling and interviewing traditional midwives for her newest project, At Her Feet, which is a podcast dedicated to preserving and sharing the ancestral wisdom of midwifery. I've listened to a few of those episodes, and through her work with the Bridge Midwives, Blyss continues to mentor and inspire the next generation, helping to restore connection, intuition, and autonomy to the birthing experience, which is so great because one of my deepest passions is to advocate for agency, intuition, especially. We need the feminine voice to, to just kind of really have its place, to be unhindered, unshackled, so to speak. Now, Stuart James Fischbein, MD, Dr. Stu, as we call him, is a community-based obstetrician and an associate of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, published author of the book Fearless Pregnancy, Wisdom and Reassurance from a Doctor, a Midwife, and a Mom. He has peer-reviewed articles, just, so many breech birth deliveries, because that's what he's known for, right? So he completed his residency at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, and he spent 24 years assisting women with hospital births, and for the next 12 years was a home birth obstetrician who worked directly with midwives, assisting local Southern California families. So he has since retired from his attending of home births back in 2022, and he sort of focused to traveling, speaking, lecturing, advocating for reteaching breech and twin birth skills, and also just a respect for the normalcy of birth and honoring informed consent. So he hosts the weekly Birthing Instincts podcast with co-host Blyss Young, and together they offer hope, reassurance, and safe, honest, evidence-supported choices for those women who understand pregnancy is a normal bodily function, not to be feared. So definitely you have their links and all their info. I'm excited. I really feel that in this chapter, where I am stepping more and more into advocating for the feminine voice, but also for agency, intuition, and the symbolic or the creative and the expressive versions of this, not just anatomical, physiological, and all the things that we talk about in healthcare or even the arts on its own. I'm really excited about the deeper, far-reaching efforts to promote the work like what they are doing and promote what they promote, which is that women who would have autonomy. And why not, right? That's crazy that we have to say that. However, I'm preaching to the choir. You're all here listening, and I hope you enjoy. I hope you comment, like, and follow, and just please let us know how you like this.
This is major.
All right, hello and greetings. We are on the Compromise to Alchemize podcast, and I've got Blyss and Stu. The reputation goes before them. Amazingly privileged to have them with me. I think it's my first time I've interviewed two people, but that's fitting because you both have collaborated on your podcast, Birthing Instincts, for quite some time. So it's like fitting that I get to talk to you both. So thanks for being on with me.
Well, thank you. We're not often asked to do a podcast together, so it's kind of fun because we see each other and talk to each other all the time, but it's fun to do it on someone else's podcast for once. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to reach an audience who we probably wouldn't normally reach. So, Neil, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the audience is nonlinear. Like I'm sure with you have people birth babies, and that's all kinds of people. But I know people are drawn to you all because of agency and midwifery and breech presentation. For me, you might see tongue tie or oral issues or TMJ, but I've 75% of my practice for most of my years of practice has been moms and babies, and supporting women through the journey and families through the journey, and taking care of infants, and then they grow up, and the kids, and then taking care of multi-generational families. So all kinds of people tune into this, and I think they're just interested to know what makes people tick, and how do people find this inspiration to become healers and guides. And then I want to hit up that theme that I mentioned of like, what is it like to support people with this when complications arise, or just when life is messy and complicated? How can we derive inspiration and continue to keep that wind in our sails? So I'm going to get really specific to you two, though, and say, like, I just want to say that I've loved your podcast, Birthing Instincts. And I was telling you, I did a a little bit of a deep dive again last night for the first time, but for the second time or third time in the last week. I listened to this interview you did October 17th, 2017. A lot of sevens in there. Sounds pretty cool. And I heard you. I was like, this is the first time I think Blyss is on the Birthing Instincts podcast. And yeah, you reflected on this birth that went away, Stu, that you said you hadn't ever seen a birth go at that point, which was breech presentation. That's normal. I mean, you've done that a lot. You're an expert in helping with this. And you mentioned that, baby had this look in his eyes, this out of body kind of way that anybody who knows what that's like, you would know what you were talking about. And to fast forward, you not only ended up needing to both be there to resuscitate, to perform CPR, and but I love the part where Blyss said, "You need to go, Stu. You need to go with him in the ambulance," because the EMT was not aware of how to resuscitate a newborn, and so there you were, barefoot, without a wallet at the hospital. But this baby, I heard you say the baby lived, and the EEG and the MRI showed healthy baby. So what like for most people, they'd hear that and their heart would be racing and they'd be worried. I'm like, what's going to happen at the end of the story, Stu, here? And you guys have just navigated birth so much that you're going to see these difficult moments, and you've probably seen them go a lot of ways. I also heard you say, I'll say one or two last things and then I'll stop, monologuing. But I also heard you say to that point, Stu, you called Blyss your protege. And I think Blyss, you also went into like going from being a part of running birth centers, and Stu, you talked about how influential that was for you and as well. But then becoming a midwife, and there's so many places to go. But I want to just pinpoint that one instance and ask you guys, like, if you can relocate yourself back to that moment, how did it feel to be in the moment, to like be journeying with that mom, that baby, and then to like have that wherewithal, Blyss, to navigate the EMT and say, Stu, you need to go because you're actually more able to help resuscitate this baby. So big question, but I want to have you guys jump in there.
To probably many of your listeners, the idea of a breech birth is something that's not very common to them anyway. The medicalized birth system has basically de-skilled itself to the point where almost all breeches are done by C-section. But I was well trained, and so I was supporting women in breech birth in the hospital until the hospital didn't want me there anymore. And then I started doing it at home, and I'd been doing it, I guess 2017, I'd already been doing home births for 7 years already. And Blyss was one of the people that when somebody came to me with a breech birth, I would reach out to because I never went to a birth without a midwife, because midwives can do things that obviously I can't, not just because I'm a male, but because I'm an OB. I'm not skilled in midwifery things. And I knew that. I knew my limitations, but I also was very good at breech delivery. And this breech labor was really uneventful. It was pretty normal. She was on all fours. The baby rotated the way it's supposed to rotate, did everything it was supposed to do. And it came out, and it just like wasn't there. It was surprising because it fully expected that baby to take, a little time. Breech babies do take a little time. When they come out, it's well known that their 1 minute sort of APGAR score, which is a scoring system, is statistically lower than head down babies. But this baby just didn't come around. And so we got right at it, and we did our training. We take something called NRP.
Neonatal Resuscitation Program.
There you go. And we renew every 2 years, and we get certified every 2 years, and we knew exactly what to do. And this baby needed the full-on resuscitation with breathing and chest compressions. And, obviously we called 911 as soon as that happened, and they got there. I'll let Blyss tell that part of the story. But we were, again, this can happen at any birth. It's not expected to happen at any birth, but any birth worker should be prepared to deal with this no matter what location it's in. And fortunately, it's a very rare event. even with breech delivery, it's a very rare event to have to do any sort of resuscitation of this magnitude, and to be surprised by that. To this day, I don't exactly know why that baby didn't want to come around. Maybe Blyss has a theory. I don't know, but yeah. So I had to. Blyss told me to go in the ambulance because she'll tell that part of the story. I went to the hospital and I realized I didn't have my phone, I didn't have my wallet, I didn't have shoes on, and I got to the hospital and they took over and the baby was hospitalized, went through the process, but did fine. And I feel like Blyss and I were in the right place at the right time. Had this woman had a C-section days earlier, maybe everything would have been different, but you don't know that either. So you just have to take what nature gives you and you keep on plucking along.
Yeah.
Blyss?
And I think you had mentioned our fellow colleague, Dr. Berlin, was there too at that birth as well. So I'm remembering that too. Yeah, it's not something that we would expect because it's less than 1% of the time that we have to do full chest compressions, but we are trained to do that. And, I like to tell people that's our job. It's like a fireman doesn't like look at a fire and go, oh no, there's a fire. This is overwhelming. That's what they're trained to do, and we're trained to lean into complications. Yeah, it's beautiful that we're there for the hand holding and emotional support and guidance, but when push comes to shove, our skill set is what people are counting on. And the interesting thing about back then is I was very newly licensed, and I had always attended births with another one of our colleagues, Beth Cannon. And if we did twins or something like that, she was the one who led resuscitation. So I was kind of always following, not leading. And Dr. Stu hadn't done one by himself either. So we both kind of were like, okay, it's us. We're the ones that are going to be doing this. And you've been doing these skills for so long that it just comes through you. And I think one of the most important things about that experience was that storytelling is a very important part of learning. And a lot of times now we read books and we study and we memorize things. But my preceptor, one of my preceptors and colleagues, Alex Evangelidi, had told me a story from when she was first licensed, where there was a baby who needed resuscitation. We did the resuscitation. The ambulance came. They took over the resuscitation, and that baby passed away because they didn't know what they were doing. And one of the things you said early on was CPR. And what we do for babies, because their system is completely different, because it's coming online and their heart valves are doing different things and their lungs are initiating for the first time, which is very different than what an adult or a child would be going through. So what they need is different. And they don't train the ambulance drivers in this specific skill. So we're the more skilled people. And so that story is always stuck in my mind, that we don't want to turn over the care to them, that we are still the ones who have the more skills. And so this was Dr. Stu's client. And that's why I was like, you need to go. You need to be the one who is leading this until they get to the hospital. And it is one of the breakdowns in the system, is that when we transport, oftentimes that there's conflict between those two kind of paths. And so that's what came through, was the story that I had been told. And yeah, the young gentleman who walked up to me, who was, going to take over, I just looked at him and I said, do you know how to resuscitate a baby? And his lack of confidence was so obvious to me that I asked him the question again, and then he admitted that he didn't. And so we just kept leading what was happening with that baby. And that's the good thing to know, is that this is a very rare thing. And the majority of the time that we have transported to the hospital for this kind of situation, those babies do very well. And I think that that's a good thing for your listeners to know, that that we are trained to be able to handle these complications, and that's why we're there.
And I would like to add that a lot of times we hear stories about where the collaboration between the home birth team and the EMTs is not very good. There's a power struggle. There's a differential because they're EMTs and they're midwives. This wasn't present in our situation, partly because I was an MD. And so they actually deferred everything to me. But I think it should be noted that if we want to provide really good care for the women that we serve, we've got to work together. We can't have this like hierarchy of, you're only a midwife, or you're only an EMT, or you're only a pediatrician. You're not a NICU specialist or whatever. We all should be working together for the betterment of the women that we're serving. And in this case, there was none of that. It was very urgent. What's also interesting as a sidelight, Neil, was that, when the ambulance came, the police came because they just put out a call. And I don't know, people have heard this story, not this particular story, but until they got a call from the hospital or got a clearance from the hospital, the birth scene was considered a potential crime scene. Right, Blyss?
Yeah. They wouldn't let me clean anything up because until they knew that the baby was okay, it was considered a crime scene. So,
which is interesting because when a bad outcome happens in a labor room at the hospital and there's blood all over the place and the baby goes to the NICU and all that stuff, no police are called to come and hold the room as a potential crime scene. Again, another difference in the hierarchy of what they believe, because it's the old golden rule that them that has the gold makes the rules. And so the doctors in the medical complex make the rules. And so they consider home birth to be a lesser subset of their profession, or something not worthy of it, and therefore dangerous. Well, and they have very poor self-reflection. I want to try to stay positive because of the theme of your podcast, so I'm going to try to try to stay positive today.
No, actually, my theme has the word compromised in it. So if we're not talking about the challenging, the struggles, the breaches, pardon the pun, the breaches in the system and the things that are wrong, we can't really get to the alchemy of healing. And being a dad of 3, husband of a woman who she knew she wanted to have home births before he married. I really wanted that for family when I would have kids. And so we had 3, and boy, for me, I can't imagine that going any other way, because there was a beauty. But I know that there's people out there who, whether we started off right with a pretty difficult scenario or they've gone through challenges with birth overall, miscarriage, I've just supported so many families that I want to make sure I'm saying here now, like, to those of you who have, you guys have navigated your podcast for so long, but for me, I just want to make sure we're talking about a very sometimes challenging subject. So I know some of you who have gone through struggles, there's grieving, and maybe you're in the midst of that. And I just want to extend like sympathy, empathy, and support, and just that you would have people around you that can navigate. I know you two have navigated things like that. And I just want to know, where do you go within yourselves or without? Like, where do you go when you're supporting people through like a struggle and challenging in negative circumstances within this birthing world? How do you go there in supporting people?
I would just start by saying that we keep communication going. I've been through many different scenarios. I worked in the hospital for 28 years, and when the hospital has a bad outcome, the actions of the healthcare practitioners are basically dictated by the risk management lawyers. And they can't really even act like human beings anymore. And they circle their wagons and they close down. And then all parents sometimes want is answers as to why things were happening, and no one will talk to them. Whereas in the midwifery model of care, we have a very deep and sort of, I guess I use the word loving relationship with our clients. We know them.
Yeah.
We have spent a lot of time with them. The prenatal visits are an hour long. We check in with them on the phone. We do home visits. We don't just tell them after the day after they give birth, we'll see you in 6 weeks. We come back on day 2 and maybe day 5 and maybe day 7 and maybe day 14. And we're all, and they have their phones on, the midwives do 24/7. And the person that's on the other end, the patient, we call them clients, because they're not sick, they know that if they call that number, they're going to reach their midwife. They're not going to reach some stranger on call. And I think when a family goes through any sort of unexpected outcome, to disappear is just pigpiling on them. Now, if they choose not to communicate, as some families do, then that's their choice. Most of the time, that's not the case. They sometimes when I've had a loss, the family's more concerned about me and the team than I could ever imagine, and we're included in everything. And I just think it's human. And birth is not it's not a disease. It's a life event. And it's probably the most significant life event for most of us. I mean, I always say that, getting married is obviously a life event. Winning a gold medal is a life event. Graduating law school is a life event. But none of them mean as much, really, honestly, to women. That, again, I'm a man talking, but I've talked to enough women in my life, and Blyss is nodding, so I know I'm doing okay. Is that this is a moment in their life that they'll remember till the day they die. And we should try to make it the best event possible, no matter how the outcome is. That's the mission of a skilled traditional midwifery model of care practice will do. It is not the main theme or even on the radar for most of the practitioners that work in a medicalized, shift-oriented, salaried positioned, volume-generated model. It's not the same.
And Blyss, I mean, I'd love to know from you the same, but I kind of want to throw in there, I've really enjoyed some of your episodes of At Your Feet. I just know that you, not only in studying with Dr. Stu, but you've kind of sat under some of these legendary midwives, some of the ones who've really pioneered midwifery on the West Coast and Santa Cruz. And so I was looking at your podcast thinking, wow, what a beautiful project that you've taken on with the podcast. But deeper than that, I clearly see that your desire to honor what's come before and also to carry on this ancient art of midwifery. Could you speak to this ancient art for people who maybe they know a little bit about that, but what do you mean by that? And, just can unfold that for us a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was cared for by midwives in my pregnancies, and midwifery has really changed over the last several decades. And I made it a personal mission as a midwife to really fill in the gaps of what I didn't get from the licensure education that was mandatory in my state so that I didn't go to jail if I wanted to sit by a woman's side. And if you look at history, women have always sat with one another, but somehow things have shifted to a way where now there are states that actually own the name midwife or the term midwife, and you can't even call yourself that, even if you have all the skills and the ability to be able to support a woman in that way. And to me, that there's something drastically wrong with that. So it was my mission to fill in the gaps for myself personally, and then it became a project to help other people be able to connect with these elders and learn from them as well. And, going back to your other question about sitting and walking with people who have had a loss. Additionally, with midwives, when we entered the birth space, we didn't know what journey we were walking people down, right? We were either walking them down a celebration of expanding their family, or we were also walking side by side with them as they navigated loss. And I think that we can't really do this work well if we don't admit and understand that there are no guarantees in life. People say birth is as safe as life is, it's like there's no guarantees in life. And I think that the emphasis on the where and the safety and all of that is coming from our need to control and not feeling comfortable with loss. And they really do come hand in hand. And, if you come from a spiritual perspective, the veil is very thin between this life and another life when you're leaving and when you're entering. And as a midwife, we were never seen as medical professionals. And that's where I think a lot of the confusion comes in with licensure and all of that, is that we are guides. We are women who sit with women during a journey. And that baby, as Stu was describing, sometimes they just don't come. Sometimes the soul is only here for a moment, you know. Sometimes that is the path and the reason why. And not everybody feels that way about birth. Some people want to feel like it's a medical event and it needs to be totally controlled. But the reality is, if you look at our statistics, even if you go to the hospital and do all the tests and procedures and all of those things, the babies are still lost. So who do you want by your side, and what do you want that experience to be like? And I loved that Stu talked about that we're coming from a loving place with our clients, that we have an emphasis on the relationship and the individuality of this experience. And they're both paths that are just as important to walk people down. And again, like the firefighter analogy I was telling you is, you know, you want to lean in, because most people, when there's a loss, especially the loss of a child, people get really weird. They don't know what to do. So we want to be the people that they know they can trust to be there and can talk about the hard things. And to me, that's just as important as the celebration.
What Blyss just said is so important. What she was talking about, you know, governments or organizations taking over the word midwife, and they're trying to do the same thing to doulas now, trying to license doulas and regulate doulas. And I would just do, you know, I've sort of well trained in logic, and it's a simple logical argument that if you look at the outcomes that we have, and Blyss mentioned that, you know, despite everything that we're doing and all the technology, we're still having times where we lose babies. But if you look at the overall outcomes in obstetrics over the last 50 years, you can see that despite everything that's being done, more C-sections, more inductions, more Pitocin, more ultrasounds, more NICU admissions, all that stuff, our outcomes are not better. If anything, they're worse for both babies and mothers. So here's the logical question. Should we be letting those people that led us down this path where we are right now, if you can agree that the outcomes are not very good, should we be letting those people who ruined it continue to make decisions in the future? Should those people, like the American College of OBGYN, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Hospital Association, the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, they want to control everything. What I'm asking your listeners to think about is, look where they've led us. And is it logical to say, yeah, they've led us to a place where our outcomes aren't very good and they're getting worse. But yeah, sure, let's let them now regulate midwives and doulas. Does that make any sense to anybody? That's a big point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and it's not just the medical system. It's our food. It's, you know, capitalism and the corporate world and all of the places where things have been taken over and industrialized, and it hasn't been better. You know, these things are not better. And so at what point are we going to say, this has to stop? We have to turn the ship around, and we have to prioritize families and babies and health and the planet. Like, this is, we're at a very pivotal time in history. And we really need to be willing to be courageous. And that's one of the things I love about going back in history and talking to these women that brought the resurgence of midwifery in the 70s, is they, you know, this is when women were being strapped down. Everybody was getting an episiotomy, and their babies were being pulled out of them, and they were separated from their babies. Like that was what was happening. And women stood up and said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to stay home. And hopefully that woman down the street who's had a little more experience with birth than me will come and be with me. These women were courageous. The midwives went to jail for standing up for this, and they would come out and they would go right back to serving these women because it was the right thing to do. And we've lost that courage and that heroism, you know, like that's so infrequent these days. We're just kind of like sheep and minions, like, right? We're just online and entertaining ourselves and like shopping, and like, while our planet is dying and our kids are sick. 50% of our children have chronic diseases. Like, we need to and you talked in the beginning about how do we keep going and why are we doing this? And during the pandemic, Stu and I had already started the podcast in 2007. Well, he had been doing it a long time, but together in 2017. And then the pandemic happened and we both were looking around like, what the hell is happening to our colleagues, to people, like, we could see through it all, but so many other people just they said, go in your house and close the door and don't come out. And that's what people did. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced, and I think that really solidified our relationship, because Stu is a man he's a man of courage, and he will speak out and say his truth. And that to me is something I could totally align with. And we just said, like, we're going to do the best we can to get out this information to people as broadly as we possibly can. That's where we united, and that's what we do every week. We really just try and expose people to different ideas and concepts about not just childbirth, but about vaccinations and child rearing and, all of the things that go around that, that people are very confused about. There is a lot of misinformation, and we don't like that term. I shouldn't have used that term. Sorry, Stu.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of, censoring, and it's confusing. And so we really try and be a place where people can hear no nonsense, and I think that we do have a lot of people who really trust us and trust that we're going to the best of our ability, tell the truth and expose them to different aspects of looking at health and well-being that hopefully will inspire people.
We have certain words we don't like. We don't like incompetent cervix. We don't like, there's certain words that we don't like. But misinformation is one of those words that doesn't mean anything. It's made up. It was made up during COVID. Because if something is not true, then it's false.
Right.
And if something is told falsely on purpose, that's a lie. All right. Misinformation is actually a euphemism for information that's true that the mainstream narrative doesn't like. So people have to understand when they hear that term anymore, I want to vomit. I don't like the term provider. Providers become part of our language now. But provider was brought in by insurance executives, insurance companies, to minimize the idea that doctors and patients have a relationship. Instead of picking a doctor, you picked a provider. And then they even insulted midwives even further by calling them mid-level providers. They're not even providers, okay? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean anything. You have to, the use of language has been manipulated beyond our comprehension. And as Blyss says, people are just scrolling by and they don't pay any attention to this stuff because there's some new gadget they can buy on Amazon. And that's what they're doing. And they're missing out on everything that's going around them. And people are waking up in our feed and in our, the 20-30% of people that they say didn't fall for the COVID scam and stuff. There's always that exception. Those people resist mass formation. But we have to somehow reach the other 70%, or it isn't really going to make that much of a difference. If we can't change what they're spraying in the air, if we can't change what they're putting in the food, if we can't change the fact that vaccines may at one time have started out as a good idea, but then it got morphed into this money-making toxic quagmire that, you had, I love your previous guest, Joel Warsh. I mean, we know him. We're friends with him. We've had clients together, but he's a little bit soft on that. He says, I just want to advise people about the options and stuff like that. No, vaccines are horrible. And until they clean them up and until they prove they're safe, you should not put one of them in your child. I'll say that because I'm opinionated and I'm okay at saying that. Other people are being a little bit wishy-washy. The time for being wishy-washy is over. You can't be wishy-washy anymore because the other people will just overwhelm you. You have to stand up for what you believe in. And there aren't always going to be agreements. I mean, Blyss and I don't agree on all subjects. We love each other anyway. We're a great example to people who disagree. Like I have family members who uninvited me to weddings or bat mitzvahs because I chose to be the healthy, unvaccinated one, and that sort of thing. But there are people who abandon their friendships with people. There are neighbors who call in the police on their neighbors because they had too many people in their backyard during COVID. How does that happen? How do people turn on people like that? What's going on in their brain? And it's all boils down to fear. It's all about fear. And you always fear, to quote the Batman movie, you always fear what you don't understand. And if people don't take the time to understand something and they're told that this is scary, they're going to fear that. And then they're going to do whatever they can to protect themselves, including following, like Blyss says, like little sheep, like just, or lemmings, just going right over the cliff, because that's what everybody else is doing. I mean, the idea that we stood on little dots 6 feet apart and people got upset if you stepped off the dot, yet you were in a crowded airport or in a crowded airplane sitting next to somebody and taking your mask off to eat your chips. That's okay. I mean, how do we even thought that made any sense whatsoever, that we were arresting people for being on the beach during COVID? Who are these people and how do they get in leadership positions? And again, gets back to my logical argument. Why are we letting them make decisions for us in the future?
And for me, it's the bodily autonomy part, right? It's like, no matter what, we need to make sure that we don't have that slippery slope of they can force you to do something with your body, whether it's birth, whether it's vaccines, whether it's taking a medication or, having to eat food that is mutated and is killing us and causing cancer. Like, these are things that are important, that as an individual person, as a being, I was birthed here and I get to choose what I do with my body. That should be an unequivocal as people, that you cannot, especially something that has not been deemed to be safe. If you're not sure, do not put that in your body. You're going to be better off leaving your system to handle what it needs to handle. People don't even understand immunity anymore. It's like we've just checked out of our brains and we're letting, this 5-second soundbite inform us about what we should do with our entire lives. Like, that is a dangerous path. And we really need to start being in community, finding like-minded people, helping each other understand and pull apart some of these things. So much of the studies and the media and the things that are coming out can be manipulated. I mean, you look at AI videos now. It's crazy. You can't
What's real?
You can't tell the difference. So, like, be with people. Go connect with people in your community, face to face. Sit down, have conversations, see what's going on in with your farmers, with your water, with, like, that's what we need to do. We need to be going back to, not to say that some of these things aren't beautiful. Some, thank God for penicillin. Thank God for surgery. Thank God we figured out about the germ theory. These are positive things. We're not saying like throw everything out, but be smart, because these things, we can see that our society is depressed and sick. And this is one of the ways that Stu and I do differ, is like, he leans more towards politics and I lean more towards spirituality. And for me, politicians are not going to save this. We're going to save this from a spiritual revolution. We have to wake up and get back to our heart and know that there is more than how we are existing right now. That, to me, is the main message.
And it's powerful. And I'm almost don't want to interrupt because you guys are in such a good flow.
I know.
But
that's what I said. Get us going, man.
Right? What I'll say is there's like so many through lines here. I mean, I understand why you both are so passionate, because we're talking about the sanctity of human life, and that's a sacred thing. We were given this life. We were created. We have this existence, and for what? And I know you both are walking out your passions, your advocacy, and you're both fighters for that, right? You're not fighting. And I mean, I know you're talking about things and structures and systems that aren't good, but I really see through that you're fighting for the beauty of life. And I think cognitive dissonance, Stu, is one of the words that I think I was seeing in there with what you were talking about, like
Oh
how,
yeah.
it's there's such dissonance going on. And I love, Blyss, how you went to some you both just traverse that conversation so well. Would you just like get in front of people, unite, connect? And I think that's like a term I'll just throw in there, cognitive resonance. It's like when we see like-minded people who we can resonate with, not only will we hang out together with people who are in our same camp, but it's like, humanity as a collective consciousness, we all deep down want to live, want to flourish, and want to love people. And sometimes people forget that, systems forget that, politicians, spiritual people forget that. So if we have like a strong outward like compassion, and we love and we walk the truth and speak the truth like you two do, we're gonna raise up people's resonance to walk in a way that's higher, and we call them higher. So I really feel like both of you are doing that. And even though you're speaking about different aspects, it's of humanity and of being a being and of existence. And I think most people who tune into this have gone down 17 rabbit holes to get to this podcast. So that's
Yeah.
that's how they're here. But with that being said, we're coming at it from all different angles of where people have been, what struggles they've seen, what maybe they haven't come across in information. So to have both of you be such advocates for life and for the sanctity of life is really beautiful. In fact, my podcast used to be called Embryology. There's too much to say about that, but I interviewed some of the leading experts on embryology, gestation and development, and more from an embodied perspective, people who worked somatically and guided families to go back to those in utero stages, to look at the things that formed us so we know how informed we need to be in order to bring solutions and answers. And that's made a huge place in my work. But I think there's, you could say, how do we get this message out there? I know you guys have more than just interviewed. You've journeyed with, somebody who, Kim Vanderbeek, right? And it's the wife of, James Vanderbeek, and who didn't grow up watching, for me, Dawson's Creek and loving that and coming up with that. But I know, she's been an advocate for not only what you do, journeying with you guys, and I've heard her speak about, some of the things that they've journeyed with this, and how, and maybe you've had many other people who have more of a microphone and an outreach. And how have you seen kind of your voices get out there? Your podcast is a great example of that. How have you seen that ripple effect? What's a phrase you've heard where somebody says, you guys, because you've said this is how it's helped me? Or you could say, like, practitioner. I don't want to say provider. I usually say practitioners, and so I usually don't say providers. But just like, tell me about this. I mean, we could pull up testimonies, but what's the thing where you said you've mentioned something and you've seen what it's done for others, whether it be on a broadcast or somebody that's come to you and they've been influenced? What stands out to you guys?
I can just say something on a small scale is that I go around the world actually, and I teach a 2-day seminar on breech and twin skills, because the medical industrial complex that runs the residency programs has basically dropped the ball, and they're not teaching this very important core skill that anybody who's working with pregnant women ought to know. And one of the most satisfying parts of my career is seeing people coming that first day who don't really know anything. And by the time they leave on the end of the second day, they're not experts in breech delivery, but they would, if they went if they went home that night and their neighbor was having a surprise breech birth, they would know exactly what to do. And getting emails or DMs or just posts on Instagram of people writing me personally and saying, Stu, you'll never believe what happened. I finished your class, I went home, and it was a surprise breech, and it went perfectly. It went just like the videos you showed, or no, it didn't turn, and I knew that it was stuck sideways, and I knew that I had to reach up and rotate the baby and sweep the arms down. I knew what I had to do. That for me is, again, these individual stories are the ripple effects that go on, because that family that ended up having that midwife, generally it's a midwife, very few doctors take these things, has changed forever. Their life has changed forever. I don't even have to get into why. It's just, those are the kind of things where if we make these small steps, that's how I get noticed. That's how Blyss gets noticed, is our story gets told by somebody who tells it, who sends it to somebody else, who then maybe they have a platform and maybe they get me on. I mean, I got invited to be on the Daily Show 2 years ago. How did that happen? I didn't know Michelle Wolf from a hole in the wall, but Michelle Wolf had a home birth. I think in either Portugal or Spain or someplace like that. And she heard my name through somebody, and she called me up and we had a conversation, and she invited me to come to New York and be on the show. I mean, we're still waiting for Joe Rogan to have us on, by the way.
I know, Joe. Come on. Get with
But
it.
these kind of things, they happen. And again, you're right. Anybody that's hearing us right now is already woken up a little bit, because people that listen to our podcast, listen to your podcast, they're already ahead of the game, because we're speaking to a select audience. How do we reach the people that don't? Very hard to do. It's very hard to do, because social media the evils of social media are terrible. They will feed them things that they want to be fed, and they will not feed them alternative things. And the idea that if something doesn't interest you in about 4 seconds, you scroll on to something else, which is the attention span these days of people.
Wait a minute. We just went from 5 seconds with Blyss to 4 seconds with you. We better not dwindle down to nothing, because otherwise we'd be.
Yeah, well, my kids look at me too. At night, it's sort of, again, it's a horrible thing to do at night. I should read a book, or I should meditate or do something. But no, I'm trying to catch up on my DMs from the day so I can respond to people, and I'm scrolling, and it's not a good thing. It's a lazy thing to do. The hard thing to do is to learn the things that you don't know, and people don't want to do that. It's difficult. There is cognitive dissonance there, not just in the birth workers who are injecting pregnant women with 5 vaccines while they're pregnant. No, it's not just it's the families themselves. They don't want to learn something. They would rather go to Amazon and buy something off Amazon, or than learn how to fix or call a plumber, or call somebody, then learn how to fix a pipe, or learn how to make applesauce from your apples that are rotting on the tree, or make banana bread from the bananas that are too ripe. No, they just throw the bananas out and go buy new bananas. I know it's a funny analogy, but our ancestors 100 years ago knew how to make fruit, make jam, make pickles. They had to do those things. Those skills are gone now. If we ever go back to the Stone Age, our species is.
Actually, they're not gone. There's a lot of people who are homesteading and doing all of that. They will be the ones that
will be the ones that survive.
Well.
They will
be
our
very
generation.
popular. I always say if there was a zombie apocalypse, midwives would be very popular, because we know all kinds of things about herbs and healing and suturing and babies coming through and all of that doesn't take all that technology. If the hospital doesn't have power, they're not going to know what the heck to do. I promise you that. They probably can't even get their meds out of the container, because it's all powered. Yes.
Do you know how to make suture from catgut?
I don't, but I bet someone does.
So next we're gonna do a little lesson on how to make suture. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna go into that. Well, I just wanted to say that as a bio-optimizer healer, I use all kinds of technology, all the latest tech, and some people bring in their technology because some of my clients have the best technology on the planet. But what I love to do manual therapy that doesn't need any of the technologies to go about healing, to bring change, so people can feel that, not only so that they can feel that without the need for technology if I don't happen to have that tech, but also so I can teach them how to heal themselves or their babies or their kids with the techniques that I show them. So I'm right in line with you all. And then it's 11:11. We just hit that time. It's a portal, but no, I'm just kidding. It's numerology. I love the numbers and what they say. But I wanted to go to this next place, because if I don't go there, we'll just talk to the end of our time, and I wouldn't have asked you I think there's wisdom you all have, and if I can funnel it towards my beloved question of, I want to ask you this question. It's about the theme of my podcast, Compromise to Alchemized, partly inspired by my love of The Alchemist, a story that I've read many times. And it's really not the story in the words, but it's what I took from it. And there's this part in the story where the protagonist, Santiago, the shepherd, who's this searcher of his dream, he comes across this mystical figure on a bench that's sitting there, and that king is named Melchizedek. But that guy, the king, asks Santiago, or he tells Santiago, he says, the universe conspires in your favor when you are in pursuit of your personal legend. So I ask my wonderful interviewees this question of, what is your personal legend? I'll quickly explain what that means. It could be,
please.
It could be your destiny, your calling, like what you were put on this planet to do. That's step one. And then step two for each of you would be, that's great, and I want to hear that. It'll inspire people, but how do you know that that is your destiny, calling, legend, right? Because legend on a map is the place on a map where you see how far it is from one place to the other, like an inch is a kilometer or whatever, miles here. And then there's trees over there, there's a spring over there. So what's your personal navigation system of how you know you are fulfilling your destiny, your calling, what you were put on this planet to do? So I'm going to ask you guys to cover that in 8 minutes each, if you can. Just kidding. It doesn't have to be that long. But I want to give you both a chance to answer that. What is your legend, and how do you know you're staying with that legend?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll start, Stu. Yeah.
Please.
This is a big theme from my life in general. I mean, I think in my 20s, I really thought that like what I was going to do was help other people find what their legend, their mission was. Mm-hmm. And life takes you where life takes you. And there's lots of surprises. And I think that for me, in my belief system, that we are a soul in a human body, and that our soul comes here to evolve. And that is the main reason that we are here living this life and experiencing the things that we can do in the body, right? And how we get on our path is usually from pain. Most people have something that happens in their life and it causes them to have an evolution. But what keeps you going is the fulfillment and the joy, and that the nuggets that you can follow of your soul's calling is by going in the direction of what brings you joy and satisfaction. And sometimes if you're in your 20s or your 30s, you might be really wanting to know how to get on the path, but it might not be the time for that to be revealed to you. So my recommendation for people is to continue to follow what brings you joy, because each one of us has a unique gift, has a unique calling that is only ours. And it comes from all of the things that have happened to us in our lives, you know, the trauma from our childhood and the falling in love and the heartbreaks, and all of that brings you to what your soul's expression is. And it does make me really sad when people are just kind of living life and not finding that true thing for them. But I never thought I was going to be a midwife. Midwifery called me over time, and I kept stepping bigger into this path because I loved my experience and who it had me become as a mother and as a woman. That had nothing to do with my upbringing. It had to do with my birth journey and with my midwife's guidance. And I wanted every woman to be able to have that beautiful support and initiation into parenthood. And then I lost my daughter in 2019, and then the pandemic happened shortly after that. And those things really did forge who I am. And I'm actually getting ready to release a completely new brand and to like retire the brand that I had, because it doesn't represent who I am now. that I'm integrating and alchemizing losing a child. And what does that mean to choose to live fully still? Because some people just go to bed and they never get out of bed again after this happens. They might as well not be alive. And I chose very consciously that if I'm going to be here, I want to be my full self. And so things like that, like you could have never planned that, right? So I think it's also about meeting life on life's terms, and then choosing when that path forks, who do I want to be now? What does this mean now? And alchemizing that into whatever that expression is, but living a full life. And I think that that's where Stu and I also really align, is like, life is meant to be enjoyed. Life is meant to be lived. Life is meant to be, like, your voice is meant to be heard. And so I think, again, going back to that courage of really speaking your truth, and that will continue to guide you to where you're meant to be.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's powerful. Yeah. Yeah, Stu.
I give up.
No, you don't.
No, it was beautiful.
Tough
powerful.
act to follow. It's a tough act to follow, Blyss, when she does gets on her on a wavelength like this she just got on. Following your path, that's the key. There are many paths, obviously, we can take. I never saw myself where I am right now. There's no way I could possibly see myself as many different things, but one of them is an antagonist to a monolithic system that's failed us miserably. Do you know the term Schadenfreude?
Mm-mm.
Schadenfreude is taking pleasure in the misery of others.
Mm.
And I think it's a very bad trait.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I think that ideally I would like to see the medical system that exists and those people that ran it and are still running it have a difficult time. And I think part of the way we know they're having a difficult time is because when tyrants are threatened, they don't suddenly just pack up their bags and go home and say, yep, you're right, I failed, I'm a loser, and quit. No, they get more tyrannical. And we're seeing medicine get more tyrannical now, and they need more voices speaking out. And that's why, my heroes right now are people like Del Bigtree and Zach Bush and some of the other people that you've had on and that we've had on the podcast, Andy Wakefield, who have been truth tellers from the beginning and have been ridiculed and suffered terribly for it. Simone Gold, another one, the founder of AFLDS or AFDLS or whatever it's called, America's Frontline Doctors, whatever. So many, I could sit here and name them all. I never saw myself on that path. I was a lackadaisical undergrad student at the University of Minnesota with no direction. I was a biology major. I wanted to probably be a forest ranger or something like that. But I ended up going pre-med because some of my buddies were going pre-med and my mom wanted me to be a doctor. And so I went pre-med. I got into medical school. I went to medical school. I was very medicalized. I believed everything I was being taught. I went through residency in Southern California. And I was, again, very medicalized. I was very opinionated. I was that annoying person that always would ask questions. And I got yelled at a lot for that, for challenging things. I remember my mom, when I used to annoy her enough, she would always say, because why? And she'd finally give up and say, because I said so, which for you parents out there is never a good answer. You should get down on your knee and get level with your kid and listen to what they're saying and ask them and don't just shut them up. But that's putting that aside. Then I came out and I was very busy. I wasn't busy, but I was a very medicalized practitioner trying to get busy. And one of those sliding door moments in my life, besides matching in Southern California, was being approached by a couple local midwives in Southern California and asked if I would take their home birth transports. That is the very first exposure I had to home birth midwifery. It wasn't anything. I probably thought it was stupid. I probably thought it was dangerous because that's what all my colleagues still think. But these midwives taught me over time to think out of the box and change the way I thought. And I had the innate ability to do that. I wasn't sold on what I was taught. I was actually somebody that was curious. And I credit my parents for that, especially my mom. My mom was somebody who led me down that path to be curious. And I started to understand that what I was doing, most of what I was doing made no sense. I was just doing it because that's the way it had always been done. The old thing, like, again, because I said so, was a policy. We do it because it's a policy. Why do you take the baby to the warmer? Why do you cut the cord right away? Why do you do those things? Why are you dressed in a full hazmat suit to catch a baby? You know, why are you looking at your watch? Because she's been pushing for 2 hours now. Why are you doing those things? And the midwives made me question that, and I began to do that, which in some ways made me miserable because I had to fight the system, and I fought the system for pretty much the rest of my medical career. Finally, they pushed me out, and I started doing home birthing, which was another beautiful thing that happened, another path I could never have seen coming. And then I got bolder and I began to do breech and twins, and I never saw myself as somebody who's going to go around the world teaching this skill to people and to having a podcast. I mean, I didn't know what a podcast was in 2013. I was having breakfast with a buddy of mine who happened to be a radio talk show host in Los Angeles, and I got on one of my rants. And he said, Stu, we got to do this. And so we started a podcast. He and I did in 2013. And unfortunately, I ran into Blyss earlier than that, and I was working with the sanctuary, and that was another path that I never saw coming. And the only reason I was on that path was because of the midwives that I met earlier in my career. Had I not met those midwives, I'd still be one of those doctors that I tend to mock and ridicule now. I would still be that person. So I don't feel for the system. I feel for the individual doctors that are trapped in the system. I don't think they're very happy. I say that all the time, that most obstetricians are not happy. Why do I think that? Because happy people don't talk to other people the way obstetricians talk to women. They don't roll their eyes. They don't threaten child protective services. They don't label you as a non-compliant patient. They don't stomp out of the room when you won't follow their direction. They don't do those. Happy people treat people nicely. So I'm very fortunate in that it's been a long time since I've had to blow up at anybody, which I used to do all the time. So what my legend is now is that I am that rare happy OBGYN who I fortunately grew old and didn't want to be on call anymore. But I want women to understand that pregnancy is not an illness. Just goes back to the simple thing about how mammals give birth, and pretty much everything the medical model does is antithetical to nature's design. You would never do to your dog what we do to the human female when it's in labor. And yet that's the norm. So I've found a mission in life, and it's great to have a mission in life that you love doing. Going to work every day, working a shift in a medicalized birth model now where you're taking care of people you've never met before, and the people that you know are being delivered by somebody else, and you get paid a salary, and you can't give people true informed consent because the hospital has a policy that says we don't let people go past 41 weeks, so you can't advise a person to go past 41 weeks. You have to skew your counseling. You have to basically violate your ethics to keep your job. Why would I want to do that? I don't wish that on anybody, but I'm telling you, most of my OB colleagues are like that. And then they defend it to the death using that, what you said, cognitive dissonance. They can't admit that what they're doing is wrong. I'd love to see them have cognitive resonance. I love that term. But they can't admit they're doing wrong. We have a C-section rate in the United States of 35%, more or less. Some doctors have a 60% C-section rate. Do they go home at night and feel that they're doing unnecessary C-sections? No, they don't. How can they? Because the alternative is unthinkable, that they know they're doing something wrong and they're doing it anyway. But they fooled themselves, and they have to. And why would you want to live a life like that? So I'm very lucky. I don't know if it's alchemy or whatever it is, but I got to a path. It took me a long time to get here. I would have loved to have known then what I know now, wouldn't everybody? But if some young person is listening to me who decides they want to become a birth worker, and you have to plug your nose and hold your breath for 8 years as you go through medical school and residency, but know that there is an alternative out there to what they're doing, and what they're doing isn't working well. And that's the mission that I have in life now, is to just keep advocating one family at a time, one podcast at a time, whatever I can do, so that people start to question that. And if you go to your doctor and you start questioning them, eventually If enough people say to their doctor, why aren't you doing breech delivery? Why can't I go past 40 weeks? Well, they're going to make those doctors uncomfortable enough that they're going to have to make some change. Their path is going to change. As Blyss said earlier, sometimes it takes tragedy to get you to find a new path. Often it does, actually. I think I'm a really good father. I was a horrible husband. Had I known then what I know now, I would have been a better husband. But you only know what you know when you know it.
That's right.
So,
And Stu said something that I just want to underline before we're going to end. He said something about his colleagues being trapped. And I think that we're never trapped.
Right.
I've reinvented myself so many times. I was a single mom. I was in poverty. I've done so many different renditions. And I think the thing is that we have to admit we are never stuck and we are never trapped. And you can burn the whole thing down and rebuild it if you need to, but don't sell out your soul, because you have one shot in this body and it is meant to be lived. And I think that could go across the board with, feeling stuck in a relationship, feeling stuck in a job, feeling like you can't speak out because somebody's going to critique you. All of those things is just your mind telling you that you're stuck in a box. You're not. And I'm living proof that you can reinvent yourself over and over and over again if you need to, but don't ever sell out on yourself and just go to sleep, because we're meant to be alive.
It's really powerful what you both shared. I mean, it's amazing to see the way that you both are, so complementary. You both have journeyed together. You have your differences, but you're both passionate, fiery people advocating. And I think, one of the underneath the surface themes of my podcast is really, really making sure, like, I'm a man. Like you, Stu, I so respect the way you talk about the feminine and females and women. And we're talking about midwifery, but I really believe strongly that one of my deepest roles is to be an advocate for the feminine and to truly be part of the category of men doing whatever we can to take off any of our judgments and shackles we're putting on and help people be unshackled, not only just females, which is the main part of this, is the feminine voice, the intuition, agency, so that we can see. I think that's one of the answers to toppling, like you said, being an antagonist to the monolithic system, Stu, is we just don't have enough of the feminine voice in this, which brings insight and wisdom. I know there's more than that, but I do respect greatly both of you sharing. I think there's a lot of fire in what you shared. And obviously you've had your pain and struggle, but you're still pushing on to advocate for healing and for advocacy for people and practitioners to get to show up and to truly help people and to seek out truth. So I'm probably leaving out so much that we could talk about, but I feel like we hit a lot up. So, and we're coming to our time. Thanks for journeying, both of you, with the pain of the tech problems of the podcast today. And we made it through to some gold, I think, because I think whoever listens is going to feel not only the hope, but some forward momentum with their own lives, and just you're going to look into some areas. We covered a lot of ground. So both of you, thank you so much. I mean, I know people can find you on Birthing Instincts and can find each of you. What are your last, just how can people pursue knowing more from each of you? What's the best way for people to find each of you if they want, knowing that we're going to have all the links and everything in the show notes, but just for those listening?
Well, yeah, I just want listening. You said it's funny listening, because listening is what women really want. They want someone to just listen to them. They want to be heard. Men want to be respected. Women want to be heard. What's funny is that the medical system values writing a prescription over listening.
Mm-hmm.
You get more money for a 2-minute office visit than you do for writing a prescription and doing a biopsy than you do for an hour-long conversation. The Dalai Lama once said that when you speak, you are only hearing what you know, but when you listen, you might learn something new. Mm-hmm. So people can listen to us at the Birthing Instincts podcast on any of your apps. I'm at Birthing. Everything I have is Birthing Instincts. So website is Birthing Instincts. Instagram is Birthing Instincts. And then the podcast website is Birthing Instincts Podcast. Blyss?
Well, I'm in this transitionary period, but for right now, it's Birthing Blyss, and my name is spelled BLYSS .com. But my new offering is going to be Birth, Life, and Death all together. And so my new branding, and this is the first time I'm announcing it, so good for you. It's called Woven Moon.
Wow.
And so stay tuned for that, but you can definitely find me on Instagram under Birthing Blyss.
And don't forget, you're at Her Feet podcast and stuff, Blyss?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's my nonprofit is called the Bridge Midwives. And the other podcast that you were mentioning is Thank You, Stu, is called At Her Feet. And we completed season 1 and we're getting ready to release season 2 in the new year. So
Well, that's pretty amazing. Thanks for revealing some of this foreshadow. I mean, I love Woven Moon. Well, I love both of your everything about you guys and your names, but yeah, I love Woven Moon. I can't wait to learn more about that. And what a privilege that I get to have the sound waves coming through my podcast is when you announced it. So we'll have fun with that. So thanks so much for both of you for taking the time, for pouring out your hearts, and what a beautiful way to get to know and learn more about both of you. So thanks so much.
Give Lindsay and Elliot virtual hugs for us.
Yeah, thanks, Neil, so much for all the work that you're doing and for having us on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, anybody listening, watching, as you said, just follow, Stu and Blyss, that, and like and comment and tell us what you loved about this, and keep tuned in to Woven Moon and all of the amazing offerings that these two have. And I'm so thrilled to have you on for the journey, and you have an amazing and beautiful day. Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music, this track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, and my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day.
This is major.